Welcome back. You're still watching a Power Breakfast on Citizen TV. We continue looking at the headlines. Very interesting discussions, especially to do with the kind of lifestyle the young Kenyans aspire to. And that's a discussion for another day. It's a very interesting discussion. I'm still here with Stephanie Moya, Mark Bichachi, and Johnston Omari, my panelists for this session. Let's now take a look at the big headline. And by midnight, the headline I choose on Daily Nation: midnight deadline for Raila's petition. Supreme Court announces that it will open late to give the petitioners time, so then they can go even at midnight and just file a petition. NASA, for some reason, left it to the last day to file its case challenging President Uhuru's victory in last week's election. Lawyer says alliance rushing to build watertight case. We'll be looking at the merits and demerits of that. But let's start with this discussion about how they arrived at actually going to court. Tough talks. This is a headline in the Standard. Tough talks that led to NASA court option. Why NASA resorted to legal action? 1. State crackdown on civil society groups caught NASA off guard as they were tipped to file court case. 2. Be to reconcile a hardline group that wanted mass action and a moderate camp fearful of violence. 3. Pressure from the international community and local leaders who advised court intervention. And 4. To sidestep alleged scheme by the government to unleash brutal repression, portray NASA as violent. Now this is according to the Standard. On the Daily Nation, on page 4 of the Daily Nation, they covered the same. On page 4, NASA differs as petition deadline looms. But on page 5, splits. Observers pushed NASA to seek legal redress. Now you've had the reasons given by the respective dailies, and this could just be speculation. Do you agree with this speculative opinion, let me call it that probably there was a split in NASA, and that yes, there already comes that could actually signal the end of NASA, that there are people who said no, we cannot go to the streets, it has to be court, and some had to comply, some were forced to comply with that.
It's actually very easy to think that there would be a split, because we've not seen especially the 5 leaders together at the same time anytime they've been addressing us. So of course, and Kenyans are going to speculate, so it is very, very easy to think that. But then I'd also like to think that they took this time to gather evidence in the right way, and as you can see, it must have been also very hard for them, because this is also information that IEBC did not seem to have. IEBC was also telling us that they're still gathering this information, they're still updating the information on the portal. So I would like to assume that NASA was also taking time to get especially these forms and see what IEBC has to compare to what they have. And then also I also feel like NASA has really tried to keep the calm. I feel we've had this attitude that there's always going to be some form of violence, and I feel like they really tried to make sure that that does not happen, even in the way that they were addressing the nation. But then what I feel like they did not really give as much information. They need to remember that they had close to 7 million supporters who feel lost, who still feel cheated. So anytime they stood up to address us as a nation, it should have been their duty to update us that this is what we are doing, these are the kind of talks we are having, this is the kind of engagement we are having. And I feel like if they would have done that, we would be having much less speculation. But
it appears that it wasn't even clear among the NASA principals on the next course of action. Remember, one of the very first pronouncements was that we will not go to court. Was that premature?
The interesting thing is, I've been trying to analyze the NASA strategy, and I don't know whether it was on purpose to seem like they don't have a strategy, or they actually didn't have a strategy. It's becoming very interesting, and probably the truth about whether they had a strategy or not, the proof will be in the pudding in terms of the evidence they present before the court, which puts them in a catch-22 situation. If they don't have solid evidence, they will come out with egg on their face. But if they have solid evidence, then it will be a very big plus on the side of NASA. But to speak to the division in NASA, you need to understand that the possibility of a Raila retirement is very exciting to 4 people at the top of NASA. It is an opportunity for their political careers to rise. So there's always going to be that tension in NASA for as long as Raila Odinga's retirement or not is a card that is still on the table. It will always be interesting to them to consider, if I now decide to step up as kingpin, can I trounce this guy?
And by going to court, you feel like it's a push by these 4 other principals to push Raila out?
No, I don't think so. I actually think the court process is a process by which they will allow their supporters, okay, to either have hope again in a Raila win, or to have closure on this particular matter. Because one of the problems that you quickly run into in the court of public opinion is, if we ask, is Fred Ndimuli handsome? There are 10 women who will go on your Twitter and say, yes, you are, and the other
will be like maybe 11.
Yeah. And there will be another 11 who will say you're not. You understand? Because it is an opinion. The beauty about going to court is we remove the conspiracies and the theories and everything, and then have solid facts. And even though they lost in 2013, we had solid facts we could count on from the court case. We found out that the IEBC did not have one register. We found out that there was chicken gate. You see, so the beauty about going to court is it will give closure, and 2, it gives their supporters hope again.
Yes, but this flip-flop, last week you say we are not going to court, they look like they're very clear on their next course of action, the next week they're not so clear. It seems to say something even about NASA and its leadership, that probably, as Mark says, their strategy has been no strategy.
I've studied NASA for quite some time, from when it was ODM, from when it came to CORD, to when it became now NASA. One of their greatest strategy is never to disclose their next action. And this strategy they must have borrowed very well from one retired President Moi and one retired President Kibaki, you could never read. To be predictable in politics is very suicidal. Look at NASA. From when they started, it was very obvious these guys could not join. And that was a decoy. They already knew that they are forming, they are joining. Number 2, look at the question about who is the presidential candidate. Everybody in the whole country knew it was Raila Odinga. But by the body language of NASA, it was today is Wetangula, tomorrow is so. So by that way, you keep off your enemies from knowing what is happening. Look at the question about the tallying center. They said they have several tallying centers, one even in the moon. It is a strategic political maneuver to do that. Let me deal specifically on the question of them saying they are not going to court. One, they knew very well that IBC was going to declare President Uhuru Kenyatta as the president-elect. One, their support base was likely to be very agitated. How do you deal with this question? They know very well that Uhuru Kenyatta is plus the police and the state apparatus. How do you stop the police and give the police and the fire-spitting Minister for Internal Security breaks? Is to say you are not going to court. Definitely some pockets of resistance and violence will arise in the slums. Look at how fast the police moved with a lot of force. Where are the police now? One child is dead in Kisumu. Let me send my condolences to baby Pendo. Another child is dead in Madare, Mura. The police have retracted. All of a sudden, the state has been scared, because now the war they are fighting is why don't we take the police officers and the minister to the ICC? Out of that political genius, the police have been kept at bay. 2, look at what happened with the civil society. One, Fazul is excited and moves to the register very fast. How does NASA react? We have now the totality, we have a government that has totality of numbers that has run raw. It is the registering everywhere. What happens? The international community that was supporting Jubilee all of a sudden has changed, and they are saying, wait, if this is what is going to come for the next 5 years, then this government needs to be checked. So That was a genius in terms of strategy. Third, all the international observers clearly said the elections were fair, transparent, and concede. How will NASA deal with that? NASA moves in and say, give us Form 34B. What has happened? The Carter Center, the very many organizations, the churches that were clinging to say concede, have eaten the humble pie. Now they are saying, no. Give NASA their position. That is strategy. So NASA, having lost in 2013, knows very well that when an incumbent sits and is declared an elect, he has the advantage of a ruling party and government. Therefore, the only way to play with this person is to play hide and seek. And definitely, if you see, now they have not even filed this petition. Who said they'll file it? Is there anywhere they have said in our contract that they are going to file it? Suppose they reach today midnight and say, we have looked at and said that the country is bigger than us. So it's part of a quiet management issue when you deal with an incumbent. Lastly, Fred, when I look at NASA, it might also be lack of strategy. And in
despite all that,
yes, I'm telling you, lack of strategy is also a political strategy.
Yeah.
And that's what Mark is saying. For you not to have strategy, they say, when you ask a hard question, when you don't have an answer, you either open your mouth and make yourself a big fool because you don't have knowledge, or keep quiet and people think you have seen that the question is irrelevant when you didn't have an answer. So silence is golden. So I don't know when you can be able to say that it is strategy or not strategy. Whichever direction that we look at it, it is strategy. The reality of what NASA has been doing is up to today midnight. When they bring whatever they call evidence that they have, when the IBC brings their evidence, if there will be a petition, when Jubilee brings out their evidence, and for this time, remember, the petition, once it is filed, within 6 hours, it must be filed online, on soft copy. So within, by 6 in the morning tomorrow, it will be all over on soft copy. Every Kenyan will be looking at the type of evidence that we have. The question that every Kenyan wants to know is, one, it's not really the outcome of the petition. The legitimacy of the results and the effect of what evidence they will bring out will want to do this. Either the IBC will close shop. If evidence is produced, as they claim that there were polling stations that were generated by computers that were not gazetted.
And that we will get to see.
If ever.
But listening to Dunstan before we changed the narrative, it appears that if that was a strategy, then it is a good strategy.
It actually has worked, because you see, even as Kenyans, we are seated here thinking, okay, so what is happening? And then there's also been a lot of information coming about online. Anywhere when you watch the news, you get to hear that apparently some results came in form of a book, a page, a handwritten page. So you start wondering, okay, what really was IEBC doing? And you see, it is creating a lot of doubt. And as he was saying, their silence could also be part of a strategy.
Well, there is a lot of fake news.
Yeah, there's always a lot of, and you see, that is what it is up to IEBC to prove to us that it is not fake. Have they done that yet? To me, they have not. And that is the point, that IEBC has not necessarily inspired the confidence of Kenyans. And this started way before the elections, the publishing of the voters list. There were just so many issues. And any person seated at home, and I would like to believe that whether you're a Jubilee or NASA supporter, you would be able to look at it and see the key issues at hand. Also looking at it, he said that the observers, they talked about having a free and fair election. Let me tell you something. The observers were seated in the the stations and all that. When you see people queuing, they are not. There's no form of, like, there's no arguments coming about. There's no disruption. That is fair. That is, to them, that is free, fair, peaceful. But then Kenyans, and I believe NASA does not have an issue with the electoral process. The process was the tallying. The issue at hand is the tallying. So the process could have been free and fair. We all queued. We got our forms. They got into the ballot. But what happens? What the transition from the ballot to the announcement of the results is what is in question here. And also to speak on NASA's strategy, they have approached it in a very, like, I feel like what they are doing is also not forcing information on Kenyans, because they have always been accused of incitement. They are letting Kenyans see the issues for themselves. So that could be a very, very good strategy, and I hope that they do have that evidence. I do hope that they've collected a few things, because as the observers were speaking, I remember one said that it was free and fair. We did observe some anomalies, but they were not enough to affect the overall results. But as a Kenyan seated at home, I'm like, what anomalies were those? I want to know what that was. Whether it does not affect the overall result, what was that? Because that is already a problem for me. And I feel like they dismissed that small problem that they're calling a problem. At the end of it all, as Kenyans, we deserve to know what was happening, because otherwise, why were they here? Okay. Yeah.
And Mark, of course, on that issue, even as we contribute to this, on that issue of retirement of Raila Odinga, now that you mentioned it, there are those who argue, and this is purely hypothetical, that probably that is the best route for retirement for Raila Odinga, going to court, having the court declare that yes, this one was fair and you lost, instead of him coming on a podium and saying, Kenyans, I think it is time. Probably he wants that burden taken away from him. This is what some people are saying, that he wants that burden taken away from him and let the courts declare, not himself.
You know, absolutely. One of the key things that needs happens at every transition point is you've got to manage the expectation of your supporters. It is incumbent upon him to be able to manage these 6 to 7 million people who voted for you. What do they expect of you? What are you going to become? Because you don't just disappear into the sunset when you've got 7 million voters. Ekuru Aukot can do that. Wainaina can do that. They can disappear tomorrow. No one will notice. But for Raila Odinga, especially since for most of our adult lives he's been a staple of our Kenyan politics. In fact, it is hard to remember any political season from 1980s till now that did not include Raila Odinga. So you need to manage that. But this court case actually is going to be a very interesting thing, because there are 3 things that will come out of this. There will come out possibilities of incompetence, okay, where someone somewhere failed in their job. There's possibilities of mischief, okay, where there were mischievous people who did mischief. And then 3, there's the possibility of flaunting and breaking the law. Those are the 3 things that will come out in this election. Of course, incompetence is not something that I think judges will look too harshly upon, but in the court of public opinion, because we'll have that evidence, then Kenyans will put the IEBC to task and say, why was this level of incompetence tolerated? In the area of mischief, Kenyans will be looking at, will that particular officer of that polling station or that tallying center be able to be taken action against? Will they be fired? Will there be things like that? And then if there is something that is criminal, that now calls into question the legitimacy of the election, all of these factors will at the end of the day determine how Raila responds to this. Because if it does come out that this election was flawed in a major way, then Raila's political career and political star will shine even more. If it comes out, and that is why the evidence that they have is a critical game teller in terms of whether they had a strategy leading up to now and whether they have a future after tomorrow. If they come out and the evidence is, for lack of a better word, nonsense, then they will have serious egg on face, and it could spell the end of his career. So it depends, a lot will depend on the amount of evidence they give, not even on the ruling, by the way. The ruling might go either way, but depending on the evidence they
because
present,
are watching.
Exactly, the amount of evidence they present. You know, remember, I still remember when Kathy Kilonzo said in 2013 there was a black book, a green book, a yellow book. To every Kenyan. That was the statement that made us sober up and realize, wow, IEBC really messed up. That's the point. Now, the ruling, of course, was not towards NASA's position, but for the next 4.5 years, we spent so much time fixing the IEBC. And then, at the back of the Kenyan minds, there was a question, did he win? Did he make it? And now it's going to be the same burden. The burden is on the proof. If he can produce proof that is convincing to the Kenyan public, he survives another day.
Don't you think Raila Odinga is running a huge risk this time in as far as his political career is concerned by going to court? Because as Mark says, if it doesn't go his way and he probably does not have enough evidence, then that's the end for him.
Look at, as I said, that is an accomplished politician. When you look at Raila Odinga, is far much ahead of most of the politicians in this continent. Raila Odinga has gone to court pursuant to the provisions of the Constitution that is the only legal instrument available for him. But number two, he also says, we will invoke Article 37 and go for peaceful demonstrations. Within NASA, there are people who strongly believe that the courts are supreme. The likes of the lawyers Wetangula, the likes of the lawyers of the former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, those are legal people. But within NASA, there are people who believe that government and government institutions only listen to the voice on the streets. So he has said, as much as we go to court, we will be making trumpets and making noise. What is that political strategy? When President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, the vice president, faced the ICC, they did that strategy. The lawyers were busy battling at The Hague. The politicians were busy dancing and praying all over this country. You could hear the judges warning all the way from Hague that you people in Kenya, leave the courts to do their job. It fueled more political activity. What happened? The ICC cases collapsed. Look at the timing, and as I said, that this might be a strategic movement. The IBC was sued severally by NASA. Jubilee were busy campaigning. Every time the political pressure was on the courts, the IBC lost the cases to NASA's favor. When Jubilee came to realize that the political pressure on the courts is making them lose day in, day out, the president and his deputy in Baringo became also the politicians. They gave serious attacks on the judiciary. From there, what happened? The wind changed. Raila Odinga, when he gave the speech that they are going to court, used the same strategy. He has told the court, you misbehaved in 2012. Redeem yourself. And he's putting it that if you fail to redeem yourself, we are still going on mass action. So it is a double-edged problem. Today, look at it as a political strategist. If Raila Odinga comes with 5 million people, his 6 million people escorting the petition to be filed in court. And for the 7 days, the 6 million people are seated at Uhuru Park, peacefully waiting for the hearing to proceed. That is massive pressure on the court. What is the likely alternative for Jubilee? They will bring their 8 million people also to sit and exert pressure. Will the courts be able to work without taking notice of that pressure? So I'm looking at the courts. One, when we look at Jubilee went into the personality of the judges. So and so is married to this person. So and so is a friend to this person. If NASA now says the 7 judges, and that's why I had to disclose that she was my student, because anybody can file a petition in court. That's why. Why didn't you disclose that there was a teacher-student relationship? Because that's the Kenyan approach. Suppose all the 7 judges, people look at where they are married or where their children went to school, and say, Judge so-and-so, you cannot hear this matter. Judge so-and-so, you cannot hear this matter. Judge so-and-so, you cannot hear this matter. Are we likely to see some of the judges, because of that political hit, disappear to Nairobi Hospital and say, Dr.
Emmanuel,
you give me a ticket, I will admit me there. Because the hit is going to be tough, I'm telling you.
Well, it's definitely going to be a very
It is not an easy thing.
Coming, starting today. If at all NASA get to file that petition, we're still waiting for them to do that. They have until midnight. It's very interesting because the inside pages of the Standard have some of the discrepancies. If we may call them that, it's not an illegality. It's just the differences between the numbers of votes that were cast for the presidential race and the numbers that were cast in the gubernatorial races and for the MPs. Remember, when we went to vote, for those who did, you were given 6 ballot papers, and you were required to fill all of them and put them in the different boxes. What could this mean? That when Power Breakfast returns.